Well, just when you thought government couldn't get any bigger than it already is, a new study reveals that more burdensome regulations and expensive regulations are right around the corner. According to the American Action Forum, the Obama administration's rulemaking agenda for 2013 could cost taxpayers more than $130 billion. Here to weigh in is Sabrina Schaeffer of the Independent Women's Forum, joining us live this morning from Washington. Sabrina, thanks a lot for coming on. So you're saying that in addition to all the laws that Congress passes and the president signs, there's a whole nother series of regulations that are expensive and basically unseen by voters. People don't even know they exist.
Oh, isn't that true? I mean, first of all, this is before Obamacare goes into full effect, which is really concerning. But really, I've seen several of these reports. American Action Forum, CEI puts out a report every year. The compliance cost that goes along with regulations are really a hidden tax on American families and the economy that I think people don't realize and underestimate the impact on what that means for our daily lives.
Okay, so let's go through a few of these examples. Now, one you list is the limiting worker exposure to silica dust. What does that mean and what's it going to cost?
Well, look, most of these regulations are for the EPA, energy, transportation, a lot of food safety. And I think this is where it gets tricky if we sort of dig into them, because a lot of Americans would say, well, I'm willing to pay more taxes to make sure our food supply is safe. What's concerning, of course, is that this is really regulation without representation, right? These are not elected officials who are passing laws. These are bureaucrats here in these big buildings here in Washington who are passing thousands of these laws. Just to put it in perspective, in 2011, Congress passed and the president signed 81 laws, but the regulatory agencies passed over 3,800 regulations and rules. So that's very concerning.
And each one of these, you say, costs taxpayers money. There is an actual quantifiable cost to all 3,800, for example, regulations passed in 2011. Who's keeping track of this? Is there any accountability at all?
Well, there are agencies within the government that that do calculate the cost, the compliance for and the implementation of these regulations. For instance, in 2012, the office that does oversee this found that we had 57% higher cost of regulations than any previous year. That's very concerning, obviously, at a time when the economy is sluggish at best, when economic confidence is down by 9 points, Gallup tells us. So I think that Americans should be concerned. They shouldn't think that this is just affecting some random subsection of energy suppliers.
No. And the estimated cost to regulation, $1.75 trillion last year for fiscal year 2012.
That's
1.75 trillion. Now, tell me about the ACA, of course, Obamacare, bringing the healthcare exchanges online. What's that going to cost?
That is, if I remember, over $2 billion. And let's remember, the bulk of the Obamacare regulations aren't going into effect until 2014. So this is just the beginning when we talk about what's going to happen in healthcare.
Now, food safety overhaul, something that was touted really on a bipartisan level by the Congress and the president. You say $6 billion in costs to implement this?
Yeah, food safety, and that's one that I think a lot of Americans, would say, well, if we want to make sure our food supply is safe. My bigger concern are things like calorie labeling, vending machine labeling. Why government needs to be in the business of sort of micromanaging our nutrition labeling is, beyond me. And I think if we see how that increases the cost of our groceries every year and our purchases, people might feel differently about it.
We have the safest food supply in the history of the world and have for 100 years since the Pure Food and Drug Act passed under Teddy Roosevelt. So it's not a question of safety, it's a question of nannyism. And finally, the new rules to rein in security swap dealers, $210 million?
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is one of those issues where people are going to say, well, if I want to be safe, so it's a liberty versus safety conversation. But again, a lot of times these things sound okay, but they're really, a lot of times it's based on bad science, bad reporting, and there's other ways that we can manage things without adding yet another regulation. If there's a real issue at stake, then we need to pass a real law.
Sabrina Schaeffer joining us from Washington. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Up next, the